Welcome to the last video, guys. If you've made it to this video, I applaud you for your discipline so far. Give yourself some credit because you are on track to add a pretty holistic understanding of Git to your skill set. In this one, we'll cover the concepts we talked about pertaining to those needed before working with Git in a team. So without further ado, let's get started. If you remember the slide, we listed a few points which I personally think are important concepts to know before working in a team. So what we'll take a look at in this video is how to clone a repository, working with branches, how to resolve conflicts, working with the remote repository, how pull requests work, and at the end, we'll go over a few other advanced concepts and some pointers for troubleshooting. Okay, here is where we are so far. We have a functioning app, and let's assume now more people are going to be working on this project. But first, for other people to find it, we are going to have to publish a repository and add this existing code to some kind of a service. For the sake of simplicity and popular demand in the open source world, let's choose GitHub. Mind you, the process is going to be the same for all the other clients as well. So we'll go ahead and open GitHub. Once you're on your profile, you'll go here to this little plus icon and we'll create a new repository. We'll choose a name unique to our account. We'll just call it tracker. Add in a description. You can choose if you want it to be available publicly or not. I'll just leave it public for now. You can add a README file. We'll skip this since one has been initialized for us right off the bat with Create React App. We then have an option to add a git ignore file. Now this is a file that tells Git to not include any files that we would not want to push to the remote, such as certain library or config files. And lastly, we get to choose a license for our project. You don't have to worry about this, but if you're curious, here's a site which can help you decide which one to use. The most common ones are MIT, which is the most liberal, general public license that allows usage at a particular condition, and Creative Commons for education. Anyway, so let's go ahead and create that repo. To begin with, Git will give us a few setup steps depending on what kind of initialization we would be adopting. So there are three different kinds of it. The first one is if we would be creating a new repository from the command line, or we would be pushing an existing repository from our local command line, or we would be importing code from another existing repository. Now, since we have our code locally, the one we would want is this one. We would want to push an existing repository from our command line to the remote. If you notice, these three steps are also being done while initializing from the local command line and then eventually pushing to the remote. We covered all of these steps in the previous two videos, so we don't need to do that. Our next step would be to add a remote to our existing repository that we have. So we'll copy the repository URL, go to the command line and do git remote add origin and the URL. Notice that you have to do it from the root folder of your local repository. Hit enter. The next command is git branch with the capital M flag and master. What this command will do is set the main branch on the remote repository to the branch that you would specify here, in this case master. In other words, we would create a master branch on that remote repository which will be tracked as our main branch, because by default GitHub actually names the main branch main, but the general convention is to name the main branch as master. So we'll go ahead and do that next. Git branch main master, enter. And finally, we would want to push our changes to that remote. So we'll do git push u origin master. Let's break down this command. What this command does is it pushes the changes from our local to the remote. In other words, just uploads our changes. Origin is how we specify the remote place to push to, and master is how we specify the branch which we want to push to origin. And what the -u flag does is for every branch that is up to date or successfully pushed, it adds an upstream, or in other words, a tracking reference, which will act as a link between local and remote branches. So after pushing a local branch with the -u option, this local branch will be automatically linked with the remote branch, and you can use the git pull without any arguments in the future. Okay, so let's hit enter. Looks like I don't have my credentials configured, so I'll go ahead and add them in. That's weird. Oh, looks like the password authentication was removed. Well, when they say removed, it's probably changed to something else. So there should be other modes of authentication. So they have implemented a change to use authentication tokens instead of using passwords. So what we'll have to do is go to our profile page again. We'll go to settings, all the way down to developer settings, personal access tokens, and I'll go ahead and generate a new token here. Go ahead and add the password. YouTube Git tutorial. Just leave a note. Set an expiration to 30 days and enable everything for the ease of it for now. Go ahead and generate a token. I'll copy this token here and we will be using this as a password. So we'll do this again. Add in the token there. Voila. So now we have pushed our changes to the origin. Now when I say origin, it is literally the remote URL. We can obviously name it anything else instead of origin, but we'll just follow the convention here. And the remote branch, which we have specified, would be called master. To confirm that, let's go back to GitHub and check the tracker repository where we see all the files. Now our code is available for other people to view, fetch, download, make changes, and raise PRs. Now, for the real world use case, let's say you join a team that is tasked at building this to-do app, and you learn that this repo is one you would be making changes to, along with your colleagues. The de facto standard for a dev process is usually for an individual to make a copy of this repo, write code, request a review, merge to master, and depending on decided intervals, select release candidates, and finally deploy to production, which is where the most stable version of the product would be live and available for the clientele. Of course, there is a lot more involved along with this DLC, such as where it tests on distinct lower environments, but considering the role Git plays, the ones I just listed are the key areas. So let's try to follow this path, and as a first step, we'll make a copy of this repo, considering that this repo already existed and you are new to the team. There's two ways to do this. You could either fork it and raise PRs, which is usually done at one-time open source contributions, or you would clone the repo, which you would need access privileges for. Now, chances are since you're part of the team, you'll be a collaborator already, or you would ask your manager to add said permissions for you to begin your work. For anyone to make contributions to this repo, they would need a copy of the repo. And to do that, if they're a part of the team, they would clone it from here, or as an open source contribution, they would fork it and then raise a PR and submit their changes. Since we're considering working in a team, we would go ahead and add a collaborator to this particular repo. So we'll go to settings, collaborators, add people, and I'm just going to add another account of mine and pretend it's another guy. Send the request. I'm going to log out of this account and log back in from the other one. And if I go to notifications in the new account that I've logged in from, I will receive that invitation. Go ahead and accept that. Now I'm part of this team, right? Now here on out, what I'm going to need to do is make a copy of this repo on my local. So I've copied the URL. I'll go to my command prompt. I'm using a different terminal here, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux, for no apparent reason, but it works the same way. So we'll go ahead and clone it. You can clone this wherever you want. The command to clone it would be git clone and then the URL. Hit enter. To confirm that the repository is cloned, I'll do an ls. It creates a folder with the same name as the remote repository. So we'll do cd tracker and I'll do ls again, and we'll see all the files which are in the repository. Now, assuming we are the new guy who's just joined the team, has cloned the repo, and is assigned a task that they need to implement. The first thing that we would want to do is to create our own branch. So for now, let's check all the local branches that we currently have. So we'll do git branch and see that we only have the master branch. To create a new one, what we'll do is git checkout -b stands for branch, and we specify a name for our branch. Typically, it is the kind of task it is. It could either be a story, a bug fix, enhancement, whatever. So let's say story / and your task ID. Let's call it task 10 or task 1 rather. Hit enter. Now what this will do is it will create this new branch and automatically switch to it. If we do git branch again, we'll see that we have 2 branches, and the one we're currently on is the task 1 story. We'll open up our code editor. Since we had switched to the story task 1 branch, that's the branch that we're currently on, which we can check here. Let's run the app. The reason this did not run is that the React scripts package is missing. Now, since we're using npm, the node package manager, we are expected to have the node modules folder in which this is found. So we'll have to do npm install. Hit enter. Now we can do npm run start. And this will start our development server and we'll be able to see the app. It is no surprise to anticipate that there would be some sort of project management software at use in any team. Some popular examples in the software development world are Jira, Asana, Monday.com, and other proprietary tools. The work assigned to us will likely have a ticket such as this, which would outline its details. Once we understand what needs to be done, we'll get to work. In our case, we are required to clear out the text box after adding a task to the list. Obviously, these dev tasks would seldom be this trivial, but keeping the task simple will help us focus on the Git workflow. So let's go ahead and get this requirement working. Let's check the current behavior. For now, when we hit save, this text here stays. What we want to do is on clicking the save button, we want this to clear out. To do that, first of all, let's initialize that with a value. So instead of doing say placeholder, we could leave it as is, but might as well change it. Let's call it input value. Let's go up here and define another state. Let's call it input value, since that's the name that we're using here. Set input value, and we will initialize that with enter task. See that? And we'll add an on change handler for every time this changes, the status updated. Let's say user input handler. Let's go up here, create that function. This will take an argument event, and we'll set the input value to e.target.value. While the task is being added to the list, it will also clear it out. So we'll use the same thing, set input value, and use a blank string. Save it. Let's try it out. Try it out. That's weird. Oh, since we're using the WSL, I think this might be interfering with the local run. So we'll go ahead and open terminal here. We'll run this on a different port. Let's call it 3002 npm run start. Alright, looks like it's loaded. Since we are initializing with this text, it will show up with that text, but we'll do a change. Do a change, click save. It will get added to the list and it is cleared off of the text box too. At this point, you would have completed your implementation of the ticket. So the next natural step would be to raise a pull request. Let's kill the live server and we'll do a couple of checks that we learned from the last couple of videos. We'll do git status. The only file modified is the app.js file. We can also confirm it from the ID itself. Now remember that we are on this branch, right? That we are not on the master branch. To double check, we'll do git branch. Now there is something at this stage that you should be mindful of. While you have been working on this story, there could have been other changes possibly added to the master branch. This is where we would stash our current change, which happens locally, then merge or rebase with master and reapply the stash to continue working with the latest from the master branch. Now that we would be updated with the latest commits, we could push and raise that PR. In this process, should there be any conflicts, you will be prompted to fix them. Let's assume that there have been some changes made to the master branch, so we'll have to stash it first, then switch to master, fetch all the new changes, merge it with our branch, reapply the stash, then make a new commit followed by raising a PR. So let's do that. You could do it through the IDE from here, or I generally prefer to use the command prompt since it's a lot more faster. So we'll do git stash. Now we have to switch to master. So we'll do git checkout master. We want all the changes done to master, so we'll do git pull. Now there are no changes to master, but let's pretend there are. So now if there would be changes to it, we would have gotten them. So we'll switch back to our branch. And here is where we would merge the master branch to our branch. To do that, we'll do git merge master. Just to reiterate, we have to be on our branch. We have to have all the latest changes in the other branch, which we would be merging to the one we are on. So go ahead and hit enter. And this actually had no changes, but if there would have been, all the changes would be merged into our branch. And to reapply the stash, we'll have to do git stash pop. And the way we'll know that the stash is reapplied is if we go ahead and refresh this, we'll see the changes here. So what we want to do next is to stage these changes. We'll do another git status. Again, by any chance, if you have made an error along the process, Git is fairly instructive. So it would prompt you to revert the changes that you have just made. Like for example, in this case, if you did not intend to stage this file, you could do git restore staged and then the file names. So go ahead and do that and do git status again. We'll see that it is not staged anymore, but we don't want to do that. So I'll go ahead and stage it back. The next step would be to make a commit, text box clear, or whatever you want to add in as a message. Go ahead and hit enter, do another git status. We don't have anything more to commit. We just have these changes in our branch and on our device. What we want to do is publish this branch to our remote. So what we'll do is we'll do git push set upstream and then the branch name. I do know that I have correct access rights. Let's try git push. Oh, my bad. I should have specified origin. Let's try that again. Git push set upstream origin and then the branch name. I have this extension which requires permission, so I'm going to go ahead and allow that. Alright, looks like the push was successful. And if you see the drop down, we'll see our branch appear in the all branches list. Another important concept we must be familiar with is of conflicts. More often than not does it happen that there is a conflict while we attempt to merge our changes into the master branch or any other for that matter. Since there are many people working with the same code base, this is not uncommon. So to simulate that scenario, let's go back to the previous terminal and make changes to the master branch. Note that these changes wouldn't be in the story task 1 branch. So in effect, while creating a pull request, we'll encounter a conflict. By Git Fetch, what we're doing is we're downloading all the commits, files, and references from a remote repository into our local repo. Fetching is what you do when you want to see what other people have been working on. Since we now have all the references to the other branches which would be on the origin, we would be able to check out the story task 1 branch. Now this is a good example of when we would want to stash our changes. If you have uncommitted changes in your current local branch and you're trying to check out to a new branch or trying to merge the changes before you would want the pending changes on your local branch to be applied, that's when we would want to stash. Let's open the code editor. This is the change which is pending. We can confirm that here. Let's make another change and go ahead and commit this. Okay, now that we've committed our changes, we'll push this. And now the master is updated. Again, these changes are not in the other task 1 branch, which is why when we now go back to the GitHub page to raise the pull request, we will encounter a conflict. The easiest way to raise a pull request is through the UI. So we'll do new pull request from the repo page. Now what we want to do is merge the changes from our branch to the master branch. So the destination would be the master, which would be the base, and the compare branch would be our branch. Once you select that, you will see all the differences between the two versions of the same file in the two different branches. But the current changes don't really conflict with the ones in master when compared with our branch. What we want to do is go back to master and push a change which would be in conflict with the ones that we are pushing through the other branch. We know that we had changed the value attribute in the input box. So we'll change this placeholder text to value. Now staging, committing and pushing can also be done through the UI. So I'll do that through VS Code itself. Okay, now that the changes are pushed, we'll refresh this page and we'll see that it cannot be automatically merged since there is a conflict. If you scroll down, we'll see what line the conflict is on. We'll go ahead and create this pull request. We don't always have to leave a comment, but depending on the convention that a team follows, you'll add that in there. Now, once the PR is raised, in any UI, you will get a prompt mentioning that there is a conflict and it must be resolved. You can always resolve this conflict through that UI itself, but it is best to do it through your editor and pushing the changes in. And if I make changes right here in this editor, scroll up and mark as resolved, it will submit a file as a new commit which will take care of the conflicts. But it is best to do it through the IDE. So let's go back. The way we'll be able to resolve the conflicts in our local is to pull the changes from master, merge it to our branch, and then push the changes as a new commit. Notice how it says the automatic merge has failed. So we'll have to go ahead and fix the merge in our editor itself and then push it. Now VS Code allows us to compare each change and choose which of the two changes would we want to submit in our new file as a new commit. Here we are reviewing exactly that. And finally, we'll go ahead and commit. It is possible that this repository does not have the reference to track the other branch. So we will have to publish it as a new upstream, which it will automatically track with the remote branch which already exists. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now it says that it is set up to track the remote branch. Let's also do Git Fetch origin just to get all the latest references for all the different branches. And now that everything's up to date, we can go back to the PR. And here we can view all the commits that we've made. This is the commit that we submitted for the conflict resolution. And we also have the option to view the changes made with the new push. And while working in a team, here is where and how peer code review is done. The person reviewing your PR will go to review changes, add in comments, approve them, or request changes, depending on what needs to be done. And if they want to leave a comment on a particular line, they could do it here and start a review. Bottom line, while working with others, there's usually a senior person in the team who would scan the code for best practices, optimizations, and any other concerns in the form of comments, which should be addressed before merging the changes in and closing the pull request. Since the conflict is taken care of, we can go ahead and confirm the merge and close the pull request. Now the convention is to always delete the branch that you're working on after a pull request is merged. But that's really up to a team to decide according to their cleanup procedures. Should you be wondering if there is a way to raise a pull request through the command line? As of version 2.37.3, Git has introduced the request pull feature, which can be used like this. To merge our branch to master, we'll follow the syntax git request pull, then our branch, followed by the repo's URL, and then master, or the branch that you would want to merge it to. In all honesty, I haven't played around with this command as much, so I won't be demoing this for this series. But should you be curious, let me know in the comments and I'll try to create a different video about it. That being said, if there are any concepts along this series that were a little fuzzy or needs a little more elaborate explaining, please let me know that too, and I'll try to fix that. What we have covered so far concludes everything I was hoping to fit into this series, except for the troubleshooting tips, which we'll go over in a second. Mind you that the way you'll actually get to using the best practices is only through practice and making mistakes. So I encourage you to play around with side projects, which will help you hone your skills and you'll be able to showcase it at the time of opportunity. So here's what I'll leave you with. Always create a new branch and avoid pushing directly to master. Understand the CI/CD operations in your team. Choose wisely among merge and rebase. Minimize using multiple stashes. undo your changes with checkout over reset wherever possible. Now these tips may not make sense right now if you're totally new to Git, but make sure to revisit these pointers after playing around a little bit with your own projects or even open source contributions. Alright, so that is it for this video and the series. If you made it to the end of the video, I want to really thank you for watching, and I hope this brought you some value and will help you along your journey. Okay, so I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again.